the Via Stoica Podcast with Brendan and Benny. Powered by viastoica.com, your home for coaching, workshops, quotes, and Stoic content that inspires. With Brendan, we're going to talk about some interesting topics today, one interesting topic today. Brendan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I just living the life out here in Panama. How about you? How's it going over there on the other side of the pond?
Yeah, I'm getting adjusted to this new time, zone after spending some time over there at yours, and I have to readjust how I plan my days and how I manage my time.
Well, man, do I have the topic for you, Benny. So today we're going to be discussing time management and how the Stoics would look at that. So, we've got obviously Benny and I have our various methods, and we'll go over some of that, but also just like sort of the philosophical questions behind it as well. So Benny, for you, how has your relationship with time management changed over time?
My sentence there, that's a good question, and I struggle with this because I've been a people pleaser for most part of my life, and in a way, I still am. I like to make sure that, for example, if I have an appointment, I'm there on time. Right, that's something that is important to me. I can be maybe 1 or 2 minutes late, or if I have some like setup problems, especially now in an online world, but I'm usually on time. And that sometimes means, well, not sometimes, that often means that I have to wait. Especially when I lived in other cultures, such as in Spain, if people would say, let's meet at 6 o'clock. I'm from the Netherlands, right? If you say 6 p.m., then we're there at 6 p.m. If I know that I'm going to be late at 5 minutes, I'm going to text you. But Spain, they're like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45, 50 minutes later. And for them, it's like, yeah, I'm still on time, right? And I would be fine with it. And I still need to learn how to really deal with that. But I'm getting better at it, using calendars, making sure that I have certain allotted moments of time. But then again, I don't really like to have the structured form. I like to do things when I feel like I'm, doing them. So one of the things that really helped me, maybe, giving that tool away right here at the beginning, but it's making a list of things to do, because then I can prioritize the list and then I can start my day. And sometimes I even do that at the night before, so I know what I can start with. And so that's a little bit easier, but I'm still struggling with it a little bit, but I'll learn from you, Brendan. What is your strategy, or what do you, when you think about time management, what kind of part does that play in your life?
I mean, for any longtime listeners of our spaces, then you know how valuable time is to me. It's the only asset that we can never get back. So I choose to really guard my time as much as I can, and which is a product of being an entrepreneur, I think. I know when I was working at the PGA Tour in my kind of corporate life, of course I had, I was respectful of other people's times, like you said, showing up to meetings on time and getting to work on time and clocking out when I'm supposed to, or leaving when I'm supposed to. I guess I didn't clock out, but, but then when I became an entrepreneur, like the world was my oyster. Like I could do whatever I wanted. And there's obviously positives and negatives to that. Is without the structure of like, I'm expected to be here at this time and leave at this time, well, then it was up to me to determine. So I think that, with me, it's definitely changed over time. And as with most things, I'm still a work in progress. But yeah, like some of the things that really helped me to kind of understand my relationship with time is I really got comfortable in understanding of like, what is important to me? And, of the things that are important to me, how much time am I spending on those things versus the time I'm spending on things that I deem unimportant. So I think that's just an easy way to approach it, especially from like a Stoic standpoint is, why am I doing this? Stoics are big on understanding the why behind things. So if you're spending hours a day doing something that you don't think is valuable or aligns with your kind of your purpose or your values, well, how can you limit that? How can you lessen that time so that you do have the time to spend on the things that are important to you and are valuable to you? So that's for me it's just, I think how you spend your time is who you are. Like, what you do becomes who you are. And so time to me is so important as far as like planning and scheduling, that is super, like, that's really important to me. It helps me, my mind has a tendency to wander and go down any path that it can find, but by making a list and putting that in front of me and writing it on paper and having it kind of there, it keeps me honest with my time usage. I was so grateful when the iPhone had that update where you could tell me how long I've spent on apps and stuff. So I said, wow, I'm wasting so much time on Instagram. So that like immediately, once I understood that, I was like, I changed that habit faster than I've changed any habit because it was impacting my time, which, like I said, is the most important asset.
Yeah, those are great points. And especially with the, apps, the phone, getting rid of that. But that's all part of putting your priorities on things, right? What is as you mentioned, what are your values? What do you really want to dedicate your time on? And those are choices that we make. And some choices that I've not always made too well enough. I've often put my time in the hands of other people, helping them, doing, some favors for people. I was always like, oh, you can ask Benny, and I would be there, right? Because I felt that would be good of, showing who I was as a person. But then people don't, sometimes take advantage of that. And sometimes I would be spending time on something that I really didn't want, or I would just be, just wasting my time later that as well. So I'm now, as you said, working on prioritizing what is important to me. And that's where we come to that Stoic. And I really like what you said there is like your time use or how you spend your time really shows who you are. It shows your character. It gives us so much information about what we do value in life. And that's something that we really have to work on. So if any of the listeners do struggle with, how they use their time, spend their time, and we've had other episodes where we talk about work balance and all these things, calculate, as Brendan said, we had an app to see how much time you spend on Instagram, calculate how much time you spend, for example, on your work. If you don't like your work, maybe you want to change that. Or if you, in other parts, maybe your hobbies where you might like them, but for example, in the Netherlands, a lot of people, they either play football, soccer or tennis or field hockey, but then afterwards they would go and drink for maybe 2 or 3 hours. So suddenly that 1 hour of sports turns into 3 hours of an activity. So all these things, they do add up. And if that's not who you want to be, then you got to make some changes. And the thing there is that sometimes you have to let go, right? I'm not sure how that works with you, but if you are more focused with your time management, that means you've got to say no to people. If you say, I want to choose to use my time here, then I can't use it there. So that's going to mean that you have to make some tough decisions sometimes. So how did you deal with that, Brendan? Like that making this more, as you became an entrepreneur, as you started working for yourself, making that more a conscious decision, like this is my time, because that doesn't always go down as easy with other people, right?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And it was a journey. And I think it has to be, in the beginning, when I started my consulting business, like I said yes to everything. Every person who had, hey, can you help me with this? Can you maybe do this? Yes. Because I wanted to just get in and get my hands dirty, so to speak. But I think that's also part of it. Like you kind of learn, like you mentioned, helping people, doing favors. I'm a huge fan of helping people and doing favors, but, not to the point where it takes away from the things in my life that are important. Like helping people is important to me. But if I'm doing that all the time, well, then I'm not spending time with myself. I'm not spending time with my wife. I'm not spending time with those friends and family that are closest to me because I'm off volunteering, which is still obviously a good thing. But I think it's about tempering that and making sure that you're not overdoing it in one department, that you're kind of giving a little bit of love to all the areas. So that, just to comment on that a little bit. And then as far as like, saying no to stuff and guarding your time is a muscle and is a skill that you have to improve on. And like I said, in the beginning, I was saying yes to everything. But then I started to get a sense of like, these, like if a client or potential client is asking me to do X, Y, or Z, like typically that doesn't align with me. So I started saying no more often. Like, I'm not the best person to do this for you. As my time started becoming more of a commodity, because I only have so many hours in a day, I had to say no to some stuff. And in my constant entrepreneurial pursuits, like I'm always starting new stuff, like starting Via Stoica came from just this idea of like, I'm doing spaces on X, and then I met these other guys, and here we are. And like, so I'm always starting new things. And every time I start something new, it's okay, well, what am I going to like do less of? Because, again, there's only so much time in the day. So I need to like, if my schedule is full and I want to start a new thing, whether that's a new hobby or a new business or whatever, well, then I got to find time in my schedule, which usually involves saying no to some stuff. And that's one thing I have been struggling with a lot this year, because I'm reaching that kind of, I don't want to say breaking point, but I'm reaching the point where like my schedule is fully stacked all the time. And which I love, like, because I enjoy the stuff that I do. but I have to kind of value and say, okay, I try to make sure that I'm just touching every bucket. So I have multiple businesses. I have, of course, like my hobbies. I have my wife, and like these are buckets to me, and I want to make sure that I'm giving them the tender, loving care that they deserve. So to me, starting to learn how to say no is definitely a skill that I've developed over the last decade or so. And the book Essentialism was really important in my kind of growth of learning how to say no to things that are not essential. So I'd say that was something I read before I got into Stoicism, but I would say Stoicism is the same way. Like, your time is valuable, your life is precious, so guard your time and don't be afraid. It takes courage to stand up and say, you know what? No, I'm not going to go to that obligation, right? If it's something and that's the thing, I feel like we have this in society where we feel obligated to go to the birthday party or go to the event or do the thing when we don't truly want to. And I think once you start getting really in touch with yourself and understanding, like, you know what, last time I went to an event like that, I didn't really enjoy myself. So I'm going to go to less of those. And that was something that you kind of touched on earlier, but there's a lot of activities that, have like a combination act, they're kind of paired with something else. Like you mentioned, you go out and you play soccer, and then afterwards you go out and have some beers. So there's like that drinking and sports together, which is something that I struggled with. I wanted to stop drinking as much, but every weekend, Saturday I was watching college football, Sunday I was watching NFL football. So every weekend I was drinking both days. And so I had to just be like, you know what, I'm going to stop. So I stopped watching my college team. I went to the University of Florida. I still keep up with it. Like, I follow them to see if they won the game or not, but I don't sit there for 3-4 hours on a Saturday and watch the game anymore. And that was a decision I made to save my time, to say, that Saturday is to spend time with, loved ones, or to spend some time with myself. Really, those are kind of the two buckets I choose to do on the weekends. But, that was a decision I made, that I'm not going to watch this anymore because of A, I don't want to drink as much. And then B, I wanted to kind of find more buckets of time to spend with myself and spend with people I care about. But what is about it for you, as far as like how you think about saying no? Like, do you think that's a skill you have? And like, what are the defining factors for you to say no?
Well, that's a skill I'm still working on, and we're talking about boundaries, more or less, right? We've had an episode on that as well, where we talk about setting boundaries, and it's still something that I'm working on. But as you were saying, this is with time management, yes and no are the two options that you have to say this stuff, right? Your calendar gets full, people want to add something to it, and I want, like, if I'm going to do a task that I just want to get it done, I'm not very good at chit chat. Like, if I meet someone, like, can you help me with this? It's like, okay, but I don't want to spend like 30 minutes talking about the weather or something. Let me just get into it, do it, fix it, and then I'll move on. And that doesn't mean that I don't like you. The fact that I'm there means that you're important enough for me to spend that time. But that's kind of where and maybe that's also a personality trait where I find it difficult to add that chit chat. As let's just keep going, right? But no, I think when I have to say no to stuff, it is difficult because I don't want to disappoint people. That's still something in me that I find very difficult to overcome. But the fact is that what you said, sometimes there are people who are better at the thing that they ask you for. So if someone asks me for a specific thing, for example, to drive them somewhere, I don't have a car. So that's a silly example, but even with websites and with all these other maybe tech stuff or building things, I might not be the best person to do that for. I can maybe help you, but so that's also those thoughts that we have to put into it. And then we can help them even better sometimes by saying no and pointing them to someone else. But it is difficult for me because I don't want to disappoint people. But at the end of the day, if I say yes to someone at the end and I don't really want to do it, then who am I? Who is really suffering? That's me, right? And the other person might not even appreciate it that much. Like, I've helped people, and then you expect them to do something with it immediately, and they don't. So I feel like, why did I help you? Why did I spend my time helping you while you didn't do anything with it? And I've had that happen a few times. So yeah, in certain moments, I say, I'm busy, sorry, I can't do it. That's why, again, I like having a calendar. That's something that I've really started doing, especially since we started doing, working with Via Stoica, and with, got coaching appointments. So I'm on other podcasts. We're recording here. One point, it gets full real quick. And now that I'm in Europe, the time slot that, we get to work with you and Bryce is shorter. So I have that little time where we can communicate and we can work on stuff. So that's what I really need to manage more. And I'm getting better at it. And if I have my calendar, then it's easy for me to say, no, I've already got something planned, so let's do it some other time. And then I can still be quite flexible. And that's what I like, right? As you said, you add things and you do things that you want to be doing. That's what I really want to have. I want to have that agency over my time, that I can be able to add stuff that I want to do during the day. So for example, if someone, a silly example, the other day, my sister bought a camper van. He's like, I need to go pick it up, but I don't really know how to do it. It's like, well, we'll drive there together with your car, and then I'll just follow you back. And that's the things that I like to be able to do. But that requires some kind of flexibility and able to kind of look at your time and decide more or less on a moment. Do I want to do this or no? I'm still struggling with it, but it's something that I'm getting better at.
Yeah, it is a skill. And like, I think the idea of saying no, sounds like, I get that. I hear what you're saying, like not wanting to disappoint people, or, they're coming to you for advice or for help, and you want to help them out. But I think it's more about the way you say no. I mean, someone asks you to do something, and, I guess those watching on YouTube will see the face, but those listening won't. But it's just like, oh, no. That doesn't come across as well, right? But no, I can't do that. I think, I think it was Stephen Covey or something had said something that like, it's always good to like explain why. Hey, I can't do that right now because I've dedicated that time to spend with my family or my child or whatever. But I would love to do this with you, but can we reschedule to a later date? I mean, that's still saying no, but doing it in a much better, maybe a way that's a little bit softer. It doesn't come across as harsh as no, because most people don't want to hear no and don't want to say no. And that's why you have people who agree to do stuff and then bail at the last minute, which in my opinion is much worse, right? I'd rather you be upfront with me from the beginning when I ask and say, no, I can't do that. I don't have the time or whatever reason, than for me to think for a few days that you're going to be there. And then 5 minutes before you text me, you're not. So that to me is I think really important in how we say no. And I think it is a skill that does require some time and effort to work on. But yeah, so I think that's really important too. And then as far as for me, it comes down to really at the end of the day, you're doing yourself a disservice when you start to do a bunch of stuff that you don't want to do, and as that pile of time, because we all have stuff we do every single day that we don't want to do, right? We would prefer, right? Some of those preferred indifferences, we would prefer to not have to, I don't know, clean the house. We would prefer to not have to do these certain tasks, but we do have to, because that's just kind of part of living a life. So you kind of just have to accept that not every minute of your day is going to be filled with wonderfully fulfilling, beautiful things, right? That's just life. There's good and bad in all things, and that's just how you live your life. But just getting it down to a limit, right? Making sure that at the net at the end of the day is that you spent most of the day doing something that you enjoy, doing something that's fulfilling to you. And that doesn't mean to say that I had a job that I did not enjoy, but I was able to flip that on its head and say, yeah, I didn't necessarily enjoy the job every day. I wouldn't like to be here, but it gave me the funds in order to do something else. I was able to get funds from my job, purchase a condo. The value of that condo rose. I sold the condo, and then I was able to travel the world. And so one step led to the next. So that's another thing is you do have to I don't want this to come off as every moment of every day should just be fun and fulfilling, because it's not. Sometimes you got to do some stuff you don't want to do to get to the place that you want to go. And I think that's where patience comes in. So being patient with yourself as you're trying to learn these skills, learn how to say no, that takes time. So we do have to be accepting and kind of understanding of that.
Those are great points, especially sometimes doing things that we don't necessarily like, but when we have a goal for doing them, that will make it more of an investment instead of a sacrifice. And I've had that with jobs as well, where we could say, I'm spending this time this way because I have something I'm working towards. And that's where we come with that divide between your needs and your wants. And some of the things that the line might be a little bit blurry there. But if you have a certain goal that you want to work towards and you have that motivation, then you also know that the way you're investing your time is going towards your priorities. It's going towards how you want to live your life. And the Stoics say, and when we look at, for example, Marcus Aurelius, he probably didn't want to be emperor of the empire, right? And have that responsibility. He probably would have preferred to be a philosopher, but he had to take on that duty because he knew that I'm probably the best person equipped for this job. I've learned from the best tutors. Antoninus Pius, his adopted father before him, was one of the other 5 great emperors. So you're probably like, if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it, and they're going to do it probably a lot worse. So even though he might have chosen to, we would have preferred to spend this time differently, he had his ideas like, I want to fulfill my duty, right? Because the people really depend on me. And then you start to move more to an intrinsic and more to a societal and bigger purpose and meaning of how you spend your time. And as you said, it doesn't have to, I'm not going to be the emperor of Rome, but I'm trying to do the things that I think are best. And that's where we need to focus. But that's also the question is like, why am I spending this time the way I'm doing it? That's, for example, what we are trying to look into with the coaching that we do. When people show up and they need our help here at Via Stoica, we just ask them like, okay, why are you doing the thing that you do want to do? Why are you spending the time? And I ask myself those questions as well as I'm working through it and as I'm deciding what to do and what not to do. But it is, when we look at Stoicism and we talk about that, and one of the biggest things there is like defining what kind of character you are, and connected with that is the reliability. And what you said, Brennan, was a very strong point. You don't want to say yes to things and then have to come back to your word and say, I can't do it. And saying no is far better. And, because people might depend on you, and then you go back and say, I can't really do this. Why? Because they don't really want to do it. Even with parties, that's where I've gone better. So especially since I stopped drinking, where I'm better at saying, no, I'm not going to go there. Or even when I am there at 11, for example, I'm just saying, I'm going to go home. Everybody's getting drunk. My social battery is empty. I can't do all this chit chat anymore. I've had some really good conversations. I've had a good time. See you later. And that's also part of my time management, where I then wake up the next day and I can do a lot more. So there are all these things that affect us that we don't really realize, like drinking, going out and eating a lot. They will affect us later on. While we have a good time now, they can still affect us. But the time management isn't just about time, but it's also, again, who you are, what kind of character do you want to be, and do you want to be seen as a reliable person or just someone who says yes to everything and then doesn't show up? I think that's the important things. And well, as we start to kind of slowly wrap up this episode, Brennan, is what are the techniques and maybe some of the Stoic ideas that you used for your time management and to bring it into more alignment with who you are?
Oh, yeah. No, that's great. I'm glad we are going to switch to the more practical side of this. I think it was good that we got our thoughts out there. But, at the end of the day, I think we want people to take some value out of this conversation and apply it to their lives. For me, I think that this idea of, I always go to Amar Fati because that's, accept your fate, love your fate. And know that like when you're given certain challenges or certain things or people are coming to you and asking your time, it's probably a good sign, right? That's something, I choose to look at it as a good thing. If people want my help, that means they think I have something valuable to offer, and that's good. But over time, and I think this just comes, for me personally, it just came with age. Like I said in the beginning, when I was in my mid-20s, I literally said yes to everything. There was nothing I said no to. And now I'm in my mid-30s and I've started to sort of flex that no muscle a little bit better because I have a more clear vision of what I'm trying to accomplish and what I'm trying to do. So the practical sense for me is understanding, I'm a big fan of the idea if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get managed. So having some sort of system, whatever that is for you, to figure out how much time you're spending, and not your whole day, right? You don't have to start at the beginning trying to map every minute of your life, but picking a few things. How much time do I spend watching TV? How much time do I spend on social media? How much time do I spend truly working? And so like just to understand some big buckets, how much time am I spending one-on-one time with my kids or my spouse, like those sort of things. I think to get clear on that is going to give you it's going to start to paint a picture for you. Maybe not a perfectly crystal clear picture, but you'll start to get a picture of like where your time is going. And does that align with what you truly want in life? I'm one that I watched my dad drive an hour and a half to work and an hour and a half back from work every single day when I was growing up as a child. And I said, I never want to do that because he's spending 3 hours a day just sitting in a car, basically. And that was so when I got a job, I was like, I'm going to live literally as close as I can to my job. And my commute was 5-10 minutes. So understanding first, like what's important to you. And to me, journaling, writing things down, this is always the way I choose to solve my problems is with pen and paper. But just to understand, because if you don't understand how you're spending your time or you don't know how you're spending your time, then you can't manage it. You can't change it. You can sit here and say, oh, well, I watch TV too much. But if you don't really know how much, then you don't know how to limit it. So like for me, I sat there one night and figured out, and this was a time in my life when I was binging a lot of Netflix. And I said, I'm watching like 3 or 4 hours of TV at night. Like, what if I just did 1 hour, 2 hours, and then I used the other 2 hours for something more constructive? Or if, whatever that is to you, it doesn't really matter. But just to say like, no, I don't want to be someone that watches 4 hours of TV at night. That's not who I want to be. So I'm going to do my best to change that. And it took time. It's not like, again, with everything, we have to be gentle with ourselves as we're going through change. And we are changing habits. So it does take time. But I think that's kind of the first step to me, is to understand what's important to you. If money was not, I like this question. If money was not a factor, what would you be doing with your time? Because we know money is needed, right? We know we need to go to work. We need to pay for things. But still, the thought exercise of saying, okay, if money was not a factor, what would I be doing to spend my time? And whatever that answer is, now I know you can't probably spend the whole day doing whatever that answer is, but you can find a way to fit in 30 minutes or an hour of that a day. But that's a hobby or an interest that you have, whatever it may be. But find ways to start building that stuff in. And then over time, that will grow and grow. And I just think that that's really a good approach. But also finding ways, and you can use tools like, for social media, I said, on a phone, I know it does it on the iPhone. I think others as well. It tells you, hey, you spent an hour on Instagram today. You spent an hour on Twitter or whatever. So you can go in weekly, daily, whatever, and look at those times and decide for yourself. Do I want to be spending 2-3 hours a day on social media? I don't know. If it's related to your work, maybe. If it's not, probably not. But that's for you to decide as an individual and see how you want to move forward with that. So that's how I look at it. That's how I kind of break it down and just make sure that my time and the buckets that I'm spending my time in align with the person that I want to be. But what about you, Benny? How do you kind of take a look at time and your time management, and what are the practical applications that you use?
Yeah, and I like what you said, right? The Arafati and the measuring it, that's something that I could do a little bit more, but just to give it more of a concrete idea of what's actually happening, right? Because it's easy to say, as you said, I spent so much time doing this, but having actual numbers that might actually scare you straight in certain ways. And you say, oh, wait a minute, is this really happening? And this doesn't mean that you can't do things to relax. This doesn't mean that you always have to be on. Sometimes you see that online. It's like, oh, you've got these amount of hours in a day. You've got to make them work. You've got to make it happen. But you might just burn out, and then you can't do anything. So you have to find that balance there as well. And if you want to, watch series and stuff, do it, but maybe not 3-4 hours, but do it 1 hour. And that comes to one of the practices that I really like with time management, is doing the things more mindfully. Because a lot of the times we just spend time and we just we don't even notice the hours ticking by, and we haven't even a clue what we've done. Well, if we do things mindfully, we don't even look at the clock, but we know exactly what we've done. And we get this feeling, it's like, I've done something that at least made me feel good, that at least, and maybe it wasn't nice, maybe it wasn't something that you would have preferred to do, but at least you did it, and you know that you've checked that off, like your daily chores, your for work. If you've done certain things that you say, I'm not sure if I'm going to do that, but let me just focus. Let me just do this and do it mindfully. So, we talk about that mindfulness thing, but then that's a really Stoic, concept, to really be in the moment and to focus on what you're doing. And even if that's binge watching, put your phone down, put everything else down, just focus on that one thing and just relax and just do the things. And because that's something that happens that I do too often as well. We're just doing 3-4 things at the same time. Looking here, looking there, but not really focusing on one thing. And then the last thing that I wanted to add there as well is that memento mori, right? And this is what Seneca says is, we don't even know how much time we have, and all the time that we've lost, we cannot get it back. So you might as well make it worth it. You might as well live that moment that you have. Like, it's evening now, and if I go to bed, I sometimes tell myself, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to wake up tomorrow, but at least I've done my job today, and at least I've had a good day today, even though I had to solve some problems that I didn't really like doing. For example, this morning I had to bury a chicken. That's something that you don't do every day, but it's still something that you have to do. And I feel good about it. And that's, those chores, because you do the chores, you take your responsibility, and you do them with the sense like, if I die tomorrow, if I don't wake up anymore, I can look back at I can't look back at my life then, but I'm doing it before I go to bed and say, I've spent my time the way I felt I had to spend it. And because I'm doing it, with a sense of mindfulness. I'm doing it with a sense of presence, but also with what you said. I accept the things that are happening, and this is just what I have to do. Seneca wasn't a big fan of fate, of fortune, but he said, just accept it and just do it when it comes to you on your plate. So we can make to-do lists, but then we wake up and suddenly, the world is upside down and we've got to do something completely different. So then we can be flexible, but doing it mindfully and also remembering this might be my last day. Let's just do it the way it should be done. Let's do it correctly. And that really helps me with my usage of time. And then I feel good about myself. I can go look back at my day and say, this was a good day. I didn't really like everything I had to do, but I did it and it was good. So that's the difference with what I see with Stoicism. People say like, for example, the Epicureans, they would say you have to do all the things that you like to do. But the Stoicism says, no, just enjoy, or at least, be content that you get to do the things that you have to do. It might not be, pleasant. So that's what my time management, even if I help people and I don't really like the tasks I'm doing, I feel good about it because I've helped them if I chose the right moment to do it. So those are kind of my tools, and just thinking about it, but asking those questions is very key as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I'm glad you brought up kind of this idea that the past is the past and we can't change that. We can't get it back. So like, as you go through these exercises of examining your own time and how you're using your own time, don't use that as ammunition against yourself. At the end of the day, we're trying to learn, we're trying to improve. Stoics focus on the process, not the outcome. So if you see like, I spent, 50 hours this week watching TV, well, don't. Like, it's, you want to change, but don't use that as material to harp on yourself or ridicule yourself in any way. Just make efforts to change and to a place that is more aligned with the person that you want to be or want to become. Because I do think that can happen too. It's you can look at these things and you can examine them, and then you can kind of feel like crap about yourself if you're like, oh, I've wasted all this time. And yeah, maybe you have, like, that's true. Like, I would say that to myself, I've wasted this time, but that's just a factual statement. It's not something I'm going to then continue to repeat to myself or continue to tell myself. It's no, I did waste that time in the past, and now we're in the present. I'm going to change the way it looks moving forward. So again, being focused on the present, but, preparing yourself and guiding yourself towards the future in a way that aligns more with your nature, aligns more with your values. Because at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning, what you do is who you are. And so if you want to change something, that's great. That's what, the Stoics were always a work in process, always working towards that idea of the Stoic sage, the person that acts in virtue 100% of the time. But they also understood they'd never get there. And so it's not necessarily about perfection or seeking perfection or telling yourself, I'm only going to watch an hour, and then you just watch an hour. Like, maybe you watch an hour and a half one day because you're feeling a little more, tired or whatever. Like, those flexible things are allowed to happen. It's not about rigidity. It's more about just being honest with yourself. And so I think that that's the way it works with time, and whether we're talking about budgeting or anything else, but how you want to be is more of a larger concept. And we're always working towards that, just trying to improve from the day before, not trying to be perfect today. That's kind of my 2 cents on it. Benny, do you have anything else you want to kind of close down with, or any final thoughts as we start to wrap up this?
Well, my time is too precious that it's already, the time is here. I think we've touched on all the things that we kind of, and there's enough to talk about when we talk about time management. At the end of the day, this is also, anyone who's listening, this is also your personal journey. You've got to find the tools that work. You've got to make those decisions for yourself. But it is possible, right? And it is also, you deserve to spend the time the way you feel like you should spend it. And again, that doesn't always mean that you get to do that. But then whatever's on your plate, do it the best you can. And you will still feel good about how you spend that time. So when we do talk about time management, it's all about how you look at it. What are your priorities, your values, and how you wish to spend it. And don't be afraid to say no. I'm saying that to myself more than anyone else. But don't be afraid to say no to something that you don't really want to be doing, or that just doesn't align with your character, who you are. I think that's also a really important thing there. So now, great conversation there, Brennan. Do some more journaling, some more measuring, and just putting some more. I'm going to continue with my to-do list.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Benny. I enjoyed the conversation, and I appreciate you spending your valuable time with me today so that we could get this conversation out to the listeners.
Yeah, the same to you. Time is what is the saying that you go? Can you please, close it off with what you always say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just remember, folks, time is our most valuable asset. It is the only asset you can never get back. But we are grateful that you decided to spend 30 some odd minutes with us today, listening to us talk about time management. But now let's take these words, let's go out and put this into a practical application. You take what we've said here, apply it to your life, figure out the best way that it works for you, and then move forward. And if you want any help with that, if you want to seek some guidance, you can message us on our various platforms. Twitter is probably the most preferred one, or sign up for a free consultation on our website at viastoica.com.
Thank you for listening to the Via Stoica Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Your feedback will help us reach more like-minded people on the journey to self-improvement. If you want to get in touch with us or find more information, you can go to viastoica.com, your one-stop platform for all things Stoicism and living better. And remember, virtue is the only good.